Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cut Rate Commander, the series where we take a look at low-price commanders and make budget decks with them. My name is Grazzet, and today we'll be looking at a build featuring the Pied Piper of Eldraine, Totentanz Swarm Piper. But before we continue, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you like this content, and if you really like it, please consider supporting the channel directly through either Buy Me a Coffee or through our Game Nerds affiliate link in the description. Also, be sure to stick around until the end of the video to see which commanders we'll be covering next, and which commanders you'll be voting for an upcoming episode. So, with that out of the way, let's start by taking a look at the commander and playstyle. Totentanz Swarm Piper is a 2/3 human warlock that costs 1 and Rakdos that has the following 2 abilities. Firstly, whenever he or another non-token creature we control dies, we create a 1/1 black rat creature token with this creature can't block. And secondly, we can pay 1 and a black to grant target attacking rat we control deathtouch until end of turn. Breaking down his core stats, Totentanz is sporting a lower mid-weight CMC, a low power average toughness stat block for his cost, and a set of abilities focused around creating rat tokens as our creatures die off, and then making those rats and others harder to block properly as they crack in. Taking a closer look at his first ability first, it functionally serves as a non-death payoff that nets us extra bodies into play. And while yes, it is limited to non-tokens and we can't use the tokens he creates to block, at base it still serves as an excellent removal/board wipe deterrent that allows us to still maintain some board presence as our opponents disrupt our boards, and, when considering the huge amount of sack effects and additional on-death payoffs our colors have at their disposal, it serves as a superb aristocrats piece to generate us twice the sack fodder off every non-token body we have in play. These tokens then synergize very nicely with our commander's second ability, which turns the small rats that he creates into potential death touchers so long as we have the mana open when they swing in, which we'll be doing often since they can't screen attacks for us anyway, and makes it very difficult for our opponents to assign blockers properly against them, since we can effectively turn each one into a kill spell for 2 mana a pop. And of course, since this ability isn't limited to just the rats he creates, we can get even more value out of it through rats and rat token generators in our 99 to force our opponents into positions in which they're forced to block and lose valuable creatures to our expendable rats, or let our rats through for damage. So, as we can see based on his abilities, Totentanz seems to be a commander that's part aristocrats, since he actively wants our creatures in the 99 to be dying to create rat tokens, and part rat tribal, since he provides the tribe with a decent and repeatable way for them to either get in for damage or to trade up against our opponent's blockers as they swing in, requiring us to play into both game plans in order to get the maximum value out of both parts of his Aristoc-Rats focused kit. As such, on the aristocrat side of things, we'll of course be including all the greatest hits for the archetype that Rakdos has to offer, such as various sack effects and sack outlets to help proc Totentanz's rat token creation while generating us value, alongside even more on-death payoffs to work alongside our commander to generate us even more value, or to drain the life out of our opponents as our creatures die off. Then, on the rat tribal side of the equation, we'll of course be running plenty of rats and sources of rat tokens in our 99 that our commander can turn into death touchers as they swing in, or that we can use as sack fodder, alongside a solid number of rats matter payoffs to empower them in tandem with Totentanz to make our opponent's choice of either letting them through for damage or blocking them and losing their creatures as hard as possible. And then to cap off our game plan, we'll also be adding in a suite of cards that take advantage of our creatures and rat tokens constantly entering the battlefield and attacking, to pile on even more damage as they do so, in addition to a small recursion/reanimation suite to enable us to generate value from our bin as we constantly sack away our creatures to grow our rat army, allowing us to grow their numbers more and more until their countless mouths gnaw away at our opponent's life until nothing remains. So let us make our way back to the plain of Eldraine and to the city of Edgewall, a grand metropolis whose high stone walls have kept out the wicked sleep plaguing the land, at least for the moment. But unbeknownst to its people, there's another, even greater horror lurking in the city, scurrying in the shadows, untold thousands of wicked teeth and claws, eyeing the citizens of Edgewall with unnatural intelligence and ravenous hunger, all too eager to feast and growing in number each day, thanks in no small part to their herald Totentanz. It is he who whisks away vagrants, beggars, orphans, and others whom no one will miss far into the bowels of the Undercity, enchanted by the sweet magic notes of his flute, until its beautiful music is drowned out by other sounds. First, the sound of countless skittering claws on stone, then their own screams, and at last, the sound of squelching meat being torn from bone, and footsteps as Totentanz returns to the city above, ready to bring his rat masters their next meal. So, now that we know a bit more about the commander and playstyle, let's start looking at the deck itself by starting with the creatures. Starting off with the rat portion of our creature base, which we'll be using to give Totentanz more targets to empower, and our aristocrats pieces more fodder to generate value off of and damage as they die off. We'll be running both a combination of rat creatures in our 99 for our commander to directly empower and to turn into more rats as they hit our bin, as well as non-rat rat token generators to help build up our board with expendable tribal bodies. In the former camp, we'll start off by running Tangled Colony, which serves as an offensive rat for us to swing in with that pairs nicely with our commander's Death Touch granting to either force our opponents to continually take damage from it, or block it, lose their blocker, and net us at least 3 more rats between its and our commander's token generation. Wave of Rats, which again synergizes with our commander thanks to its built-in trample combining nicely with Death Touch to trade with most blockers for only a single point of damage while dealing the rest to our opponent's faces, and then reanimating itself thanks to its own effect, netting us an extra rat token in the exchange thanks to Totentanz, and the legendary rat Kurumanix the Rat King, whose ability to grant Toxic 1 to all our rats is deadly on a board loaded with rat tokens, forcing our opponents to trade with our death-touching rodents or potentially losing in 1 to 2 turns via poison counters. Then moving on to in-tribe ways to generate additional rat tokens alongside our commander, we'll be adding in Lord Skitter's Butcher and Voracious Vermin to the build, as one-time sources of rat tokens as they ETB that provide us with some additional utility, the former by alternatively letting us sack a creature for value and to proc our aristocrats pieces, or granting our wide board of rats menace to allow them to get in for damage more easily, while the latter serves as a non-death payoff that loads itself up with +1/+1 counters as our creatures die off so it can crack in even harder, as well as Lord Skitter Sewer King, who instead provides us with a steady stream of rat tokens that procs on each of our turns for us to use, on top of serving as a repeatable source of graveyard hate as any of our rats come into play to help combat against graveyard-focused builds. And lastly, as our only other rat in the 99, we have Pack Rat, which not only serves as a repeatable way to turn our dead cards into additional rat tokens via creating copies of itself to help grow our board, but also serves as a rat payoff whose stats increase in tandem with the number of rats we have in play, enabling the original and its copies to turn into gigantic beatsticks as we grow our rat army. Then moving on to our non-rat sources of rat tokens, on the black side of our color pie we have Piper of the Swarm, which at 2 mana pop can create rat tokens for us that can actually block, and, once we have enough rats in play, can sack 3 of them at instant speed to permanently steal the most dangerous creature on the board for us while proccing all our death payoffs 3 times. Chittering Witch, which generally creates 3 rats when it comes down to build up our board with, and then can repeatedly sack any of our creatures away to turn them into non-destruction removal, and Ogre Slumlord, who passively grants all our rats Death Touch so we don't have to spend mana on Totentanz's ability to do so, and creates rat tokens for us whenever any non-token creature dies, whether it be ours or our opponent's, generating us more board presence as we sack away our creatures or as our opponents destroy each other's. And then as our endmost black rat token generator, we have a Twisted Sewer Witch, which creates a rat token for us when it ETBs, but will be primarily running as a means to grant all our rats a Wicked Roll token as it comes down, turning all our rat tokens into 2/2s and enabling them to burn the table upon death to make them even more dangerous to block and more valuable to sack away. Then taking a look at our red rat token producing creatures, we'll be running Harried Spearguard, which serves as a simple on-death source of rat tokens who creates 2 rats upon death alongside our commander, Ratcatcher Trainee, whose adventure lets us create 2 rats at instant speed and then gives us a body to use as sack fodder later, Mad Ratter, which produces 2 rats for us each turn as we draw our second card, which we can easily proc multiple times per rotation thanks to our sack outlets and on-death draw sources to quickly build up our board, Redcap Gutter Dweller, which ETBs with 2 rats and then sticks around as a repeatable sack outlet for us to use to proc our undeath payoffs while it empowers itself, and provides us with card advantage via impulse draw, and finally, Ogre Chitterlord, who creates 2 rats when it ETBs and when it attacks to further build up our board with tribal bodies, while also bolstering all our rats' power once we have 5+ in play to enable them to punch well above their weight. Now, with all our rats and sources of rat tokens covered, let's move on to the aristocrats pieces we'll be using to sack them away for value, and to generate even more value or convert them into damage as they die off. Kicking things off with our sack outlets first, we'll of course be running Viscera Seer as a free sack outlet that we can use to proc our on-death payoffs while it provides card selection for us, potentially multiple times per rotation. Braid's Arisen Nightmare as a slow sack outlet that may only proc on our turn, but lets us turn our creatures into either AoE Edict removal to disrupt our opponent's boards, or card advantage and burn to gain us additional resources while dwindling down our opponent's life totals, and Ayara First of Locthwain, who lets us sack black creatures to generate card advantage at instant speed and at no mana cost, which is fine on its own, but also turns every single black creature that ETBs under our control into AoE Drain to help us suck the life right out of our opponents while we amass our rodent army. Then, as part sack outlets and part on-death payoffs, we'll also be including Smothering Abomination and Erebos Bleak-Hearted, the former sacking a creature on each of our turns and drawing us a card every time we sack a creature to help replenish our resources while possessing a decent-sized evasive body for us to swing in with, while the latter lets us sack creatures to turn them into more non-destruction removal for 2 mana a pop, and lets us pay 2 life to draw cards off our creatures dying from any means to help us keep our hands fully loaded, while again being a gigantic and this time indestructible beatstick that comes online rather quickly to help screen attacks while it generates value. Then fully pivoting into on-death payoff creatures, specifically those we'll be using to burn away our opponent's life totals, Blood Artist, Zulaport Cutthroat, and Sir Conrad the Grim all make it in as all-star aristocrats pieces to help drain the life out of our opponents as our creatures, and sometimes theirs, die off, as does Garna Bloodfist of Keld, who makes it in as well thanks to tacking on-death draw to our creatures as they swing in, which works nicely alongside our death-touching rats to make them even less likely to be blocked, or turning our creatures into AoE burn if they die at any other point to continue piling on the damage. Then, as some more specific on-death burn payoffs, we have Nadir's Nightblade and Mirkwood Bats, both of whom damage our opponents as our tokens are sent to the bin, the former gaining us life as it does so to help pad our life totals, while the latter instead also deals damage as they come into play to deal damage faster, as well as Mayhem Devil, who deals 1 damage to any target whenever anyone sacrifices anything, which we'll usually be using to hit face as we sack away our creatures for value, but we can also use to pick off creatures and planeswalkers as needed. And as our penultimate on-death payoff, we'll be changing gears from damage dealing to ramp by adding in Pitiless Plunderer, who creates treasures for us as any of our creatures die off to help us cast more spells, or to pay for our decent number of mana-dependent activated abilities. And then to cap off our undeath payoffs, we'll be running Drivnod Carnage Dominus, who may not technically have an on-death payoff itself, but does double all our other on-death payoffs in the deck. enabling us to generate rats at double the rate off our commander, and inflict double the damage and generate double the value off of the majority of our aristocrats pieces to speed up our build considerably. Then, finally reaching the end of our creature entries, we'll wrap up this category with a pair of entrants that take advantage of our rats constantly entering the battlefield. Those being Witty Roastmaster, which provides us with yet another source of AoE burn as our creatures and tokens come down to burn out our opponents even faster, and a Rose Room Treasurer, which instead provides us with ramp every turn as our first two creatures come into play via its treasure generation, and then, from the third creature onwards, turns into a mana sink that we can use to inflict damage to any target, allowing us to deal with troublesome creatures or inflict even more damage to our opponent's faces as needed. That covers all our creatures, so let's move on to our instance. Immediately jumping into our instance, with the flash speed sack effects we'll be using to trigger our commander and other on-death payoffs on our opponent's turns, we'll of course be running the draw sources Corrupted Conviction, Village Rites, and Deadly Dispute, all of which let us sack a creature to draw 2 to help us reload our hands, and the third even generating us a treasure to speed up our mana base with, as well as Plumb the Forbidden, which again lets us sack our creatures for card advantage, but this time lets us copy it an additional time for every life we pay, enabling us to convert our entire board into draw in response to board wipes, or mass sack it to simultaneously proc all our on-death triggers to close out games, all for the measly cost of 2 mana. Then, as some more rat token creation, we'll be slotting in Gnawing Crescendo, which both serves as an alpha strike enabler by providing our entire board with a decent power boost at flash speed, as well as a way to generate double the rats alongside our commander in response to wipes or mass blocks against our non-token creatures to get even more tribal tokens into play. And then to close out this slot, we'll be adding in the removal spells Terminate, Bedevil, and Chaos Warp to take advantage of the powerful removal spells our colors have at their disposal to deal with our opponent's threats. That covers all our instance, so let's move on to our sorceries. As our first sorcery, we'll be adding in one final way for us to create rat tokens in the form of Song of Totentanz, which is a scalable source of rat tokens that we can pump considerable amounts of mana into to absolutely flood the board with tribal bodies, which when combined with our ETB on damage effects, free sack outlets, and on death damage effects, can often be enough to end the game on the spot, and, even if it doesn't, the mass haste it grants to those tokens so they can immediately crack in may just finish the job instead. Then, as some more ways for us to sack our creatures to generate value, we'll be running both Victimize and Lich Knight's Conquest, each of which let us sack our tokens to reanimate previously destroyed or sacked creatures from our graveyard, allowing us to recur our key playmakers or just be more aggressive in sacking our creatures to generate damage and value since we have a relatively easy way to get them back. And then to round out this category, we'll be padding our core stats even further by slotting in Feed the Swarm, which is admittedly a slow removal spell, but is one of the few options we have in our colors to deal with enchantments, so we'll run it, and Blasphemous Act, which we'll be using both defensively to retake control of out-of-controlled board states, as well as offensively to level our opponent's boards while proccing all our on-death triggers for even more damage and value. That covers all our sorceries, so let's move on to our enchantments. Swinging back to our aristocrats pieces as we enter our enchantments category, we'll be adding in 2 more instant speed sack outlets to the build in the form of Vampiric Rites and Goblin Bombardment, the former letting us turn our creatures into card advantage and life gain for 2 mana a pop to help replenish our hands and pad our life totals, while the latter is a free sack outlet that we can use to convert our creatures into targeted damage instead to burn out our opponents faster or to deal with their creatures. And then, as one last on-death payoff to take advantage of our sack outlets, we'll of course be running Bastion of Remembrance, which serves as one final AoE life drain effect for us to use to suck the life right out of our opponents as our creatures die off, this time from the relative safety of our back row where our opponents will hopefully not be able to get rid of it as easily. And while on the topic of dealing damage, we'll also be adding in a handful of ways for our creatures to pile it on outside of them dying on the battlefield, such as via the on-attack focused sources of Burn, Raid Bombardment, and Brazen Cannonade, the former having each creature of power 2 or less deal 1 damage to any opponent or planeswalker they attack into, of which we have access to quite a number of between our rat tokens and our creatures in the 99, while the latter deals 2 damage to the table every time one of our attacking creatures die off, making our rats even less likely to be blocked, and, when combined with our instant speed sack outlets, we can proc ourselves at any point during the combat phase to get extra damage in, even after combat damage is dealt, and that's on top of providing us with repeatable impulse draw as our creatures swing in to boot. Then, as some more traditional on-attack damage dealing, we'll be slotting in Shared Animosity into our arsenal, whose AoE scalable power increase depending on how many tribal bodies we have in play turns our wide board states of 1/1 rats into a hard-hitting alpha-striking menace that our opponents will either be forced to throw their bodies in front of or have them take huge chunks out of their life totals. And finally, reaching the last piece of AoE burn we'll be running, we have Impact Tremors, which again takes advantage of all the creatures and tokens we'll be having entering play to pile on the damage alongside all our other AoE burn and AoE life drain effects. And then to close out our enchantment category, we'll be adding in a pair of ways to recur our creatures back from the bin, namely Phyrexian Reclamation and Oversold Cemetery, both of which let us repeatedly return creatures from our graveyard back to hand. The former letting us do so at any time for 2 mana and 2 life a pop, and the latter returning 1 for free on our upkeep so long as we have 4+ creatures in the bin, each of which allow us to be a bit more aggressive in sacking away our creatures to generate value and proc our other on-death payoffs, even key playmakers if we have to, since we can easily bring them back later when we need them. That covers all our enchantments, so let's move on to our artifacts. As we reach our artifact category, we'll be adding our last 3 aristocrats pieces to the build to round out that portion of our game plan. Those being the free sack outlet Ashnod's Altar, which is a superb way to let us turn our creatures and tokens into mana to speed up our mana base with while proccing our on-death payoffs, and, speaking of which, the on-death payoffs Skull Clamp and Weatherlight completed. The former easily allowing us to convert our rat tokens into draw 2s for 1 mana a pop, and the latter initially serving as an on-death source of card selection that, over time, turns itself into an evasive 5/5 body and then into a source of repeatable card advantage as our creatures continue to die off. Then from there, it's going to be ramp all the way down for the remainder of this category, in which we'll be running the Mana Rocks Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Rakdos Signet, Talisman of Indulgence, Belwar Stone, and Mind Stone, as well as the land ramp source Wayfarer's Bauble, to speed up our mana base to ensure we have the mana required to cast our spells, and to pump into our activated abilities multiple times per rotation. That covers all our artifacts, so let's move on to our land base. Quickly running down our mana lands, we'll be running Command Tower as an untapped land that taps for both our colors, Shadowblood Ridge and Tainted Peak as more untapped lands that tap for both our colors but require a bit of setup to do so, Dragonskull Summit, Foreboding Ruins, and Smoldering Marsh as duels that generally come into play untapped to help bolster our mana base's consistency without having to sacrifice speed to do so, Canyon Slough and a Temple of Malice as tapped duels that make up for their slow speed with the cycling and scry they bring to the table, and lastly, Myriad Landscape as a land ramp source from our land slot to help fix and speed up our mana base. Then, as the lone utility land in our build, we have Bajuga Bog as a simple but effective way for us to deal with graveyard-focused builds by blowing out their graveyards. And finally, we'll be running 14 swamps and 11 mountains as our basics to close out our land base. So, now that we've covered all the cards in the deck, let's take a look at this deck's breakdown. This deck currently has 33 creatures including our commander, 8 instants, 5 sorceries, 9 enchantments, 10 artifacts, 0 planeswalkers, and 35 lands. Looking at the stats that matter to our game plan, we have 7 rats, 17 sources of rat tokens, 9 cards that care about rats, 19 death matters payoffs, 18 sack effects or sack outlets, 5 sources of creature recursion or reanimation, 5 cards that care about our creatures entering the battlefield, and 5 cards that care about our creatures attacking, leaving us with a build with plenty of enablers for both our rat tribal and aristocrats game plans to both reliably trigger our commander's rat token creation, and to get as much damage and value from our rats as possible as they ETB, attack, and die off. For general deck stats, we have 12 ramp sources, 14 card draw sources, 11 targeted removal sources, and 1 board wipe, giving us a pretty standard array of core stats with no real outliers. Then looking at our mana curve, we have 10 1-drops, 19 2-drops, 18 3-drops, 11 4-drops, 5 5-drops, 1 6-drop, and 1 9-drop, giving us a fairly low-to-the-ground curve that aims to drop our rat token creating creatures and on-death payoffs into play early, followed by our commander to threaten turning our rat tokens into death touchers as we swing in with them. Then from there, we'll be falling into a pattern of swinging in with our rats with our mana open to either de-incentivize blocks, or to take down blockers as our rats proc our on-attack effects, and then use our aristocrat pieces to generate more value and damage as our rats and other creatures die off or as we sack them away ourselves, enabling Totentanz to build up more and more rats until our vermin swarm gnaws away at the last of our opponent's life. Currently this deck is valued at $65.45, not counting the price of basic lands or shipping. This price was calculated by using the cheapest listed marketplace price on TCG Player at the time of this recording. For side grades, we can consider replacing Weatherlight Completed with Mahadi Emporium Master as an alternate on-death payoff that helps us ramp via treasure tokens, though he provides a smaller window of opportunity to do so as he only procs on our turn, exchanging Felwar Stone with Cavalcade of Calamity if we'd rather have less ramp and more ways to deal damage to our opponents as our rat tokens swing in, or replacing Raid Bombardment with Back for Seconds if we'd rather cut back on the burn in order to have more ways to recur our creatures from the bin to be used again. Then for upgrades, we can trade out Weatherlight Completed for Species Specialist, which serves as a source of card advantage that comes online faster than its predecessor despite being limited to only proccing off our rats. Witty Roastmaster can be benched for Perforos God of the Forge, who serves as a more powerful ETB burn payoff that is not only significantly more resilient, but also lets us pump mana into him to empower our rats' damage potential as they swing in. And, if we want the biggest of rats in our build, we can sideline Rose Room Treasurer in favor of Maronar, who not only makes all our rat and rat tokens evasive to empower the rat tribal side of our deck, but also lets us sack rats in order to double the number of rats we have in play each turn to enable the aristocrats portion of our game plan as well, making him well worth running so long as we have the cheddar to pay for this rather expensive rodent. Thanks everyone for sticking around until the end of the video. Firstly, before we continue, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of the channel subscribers for having helped the channel reach its 16.5k subscriber milestone. It's thanks to all of your continued support that this channel keeps growing, so sincerely, thank you. Now, with Totentanz covered, the next commander builds we'll be tackling will be the counter-centric untapper Shalatoyak the Smiling Flood, followed by last week's poll winner, the life-gaining board wipe Amalia Benavides Aguirre. So look forward to those two builds coming soon. Then, as our new contestants on the poll this week, as suggested by you in the comments, we have the Golgari Descend-focused fungus, the Myco-Tyrant, the Boros Gnome-creating Animpakal, Thousandth Moon, and the Jeskai Craft-focused Tetzen Gnome Champion. So please cast your votes in the Community tab, link in the description, and let me know in the comments who you voted for and which commanders you want to see me feature in future polls. And lastly, before we close out, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't done so already, as this channel can't continue to grow without your support. And if you're feeling particularly generous, feel free to keep me caffeinated via buying me a coffee at the link in the description, or alternatively, use our Game Nerds affiliate link in the description if you're looking to purchase sealed MTG product, accessories, board games, or any of their other wide selection of products at low prices that include free shipping for orders over $75, and a rewards program that builds up store credit over time as you make your purchases. And if any of you would like to support the channel in a different way, feel free to check out the other deck techs floating around my head if you'd like to see the latest builds, or click on the link above for a playlist of all the cut-rate Commander episodes I've made so far. And with that, have a good one folks, and stay safe.